we put more time, more thought, more effort, talked to more people, did more research on this decision by far than any other decision we've made with the Cleveland Browns. It's not something we took lightly. It's something we took very seriously, and we feel comfortable with the process we've been through.
Oh.
Look, I want to say that I'm truly sorry to all the women that I've impacted in this situation. My decisions that I made in my life that put me in this position, I would definitely like to have back, but I want to continue to move forward and grow and learn and show that, I am a true person of character, and I want to keep pushing forward.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry.
The latest public apology tour is off and running. Of course, we're talking today about the Cleveland Browns and the whole Deshaun Watson debacle. And, we did an episode when this story first broke with a survivor's advocate. And I have been avoiding it since like the plague. But like so many plagues, it can't be avoided. Too many people have asked me about it, and here in northeastern Ohio, which is kind of like the football capital of the world. Okay, I'm from the area that has the Professional Football Hall of Fame right down the street, and the Cleveland Browns up the road, the Cincinnati Bengals down the road, and the Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit to the east from here. And of course, the state is of Ohio State football. So it's like a big topic. And if you are a regular listener, I know you don't hear me talk about sports that much. And this really isn't a subject about sports. I'm going to talk about sports a little bit, but this is really a subject that transcends professional sports. But nonetheless, I certainly feel you. If you're listening to this and saying, I really don't want to hear about sports, I understand that, because I have been, there's people that have brought up the subject of me possibly doing some sports things, and I never really wanted to do it. A while back, I was in a car ride with a friend of mine who just listened to sports talk radio all the time. And this was like an hour car ride. All right. And all I heard was this. They had these callers call in, and they were talking about Tom Brady. And it was just, you can't tell me that Tom Brady, he's got those refs in his pocket. He wants an interference call. He just walks over and says, that guy was interfering. And the referee throws the flag right there because it's all about money. Okay, I don't have an opinion about that, but I listened to that for an hour. All right, and I got to tell you, I got out of that car with the feeling that I would have done less damage to my brain if I had spent the entire car ride with my head in a plastic bag sniffing glue. However, this topic today covers a lot of the dynamics about accusers and the accused and some of the nuances of that. So I do feel that this is an important topic. But if it makes you feel better, I know I have some of the best listeners in the podcast world, and I'm not trying to flatter you, but I know that I do from the feedback that I get. So if it makes you feel any better, since we're going to be talking about Haslam and Watson and football and all this other stuff, if it makes you feel any better, here's what we can do. We'll just check our brains at the door. All right, there you go. All better now, right? The clip at the beginning of the program contained some remarks by Jimmy Haslam when this whole situation first broke in spring. Yes, we've put more concern and more research into this decision than anything else that we've done here at the Cleveland Browns by far. Yeah, that's the problem right there. Okay, because this organization has some issues, and I'm going to get into the football aspect of that a little bit later. But Jimmy Haslam himself with his pilot flying or whatever his name of his company is. He's no stranger to allegations either. And, that's such a great word. Isn't that such a wonderful, convenient word? Allegations. Yes, that's what we had with Deshaun Watson. We had allegations. We don't really use the word accusations because accusations, well, that word has just a little too many teeth. It draws too much blood. Allegations has more of, well, yeah, somebody said something, but who knows what really happened. That's such a convenient word, isn't it? That kind of speaks to the first part of what I'm going to talk about here. A lot of the people who defend this deal with Deshaun Watson, which involves $230 million, which is almost $250 million. That's a really good paycheck. Okay. Now they knew that he had numerous, and by numerous, there was like 22, 26. I'm not sure. They kind of came and went of allegations brought forth by a number of women. And his defenders say, well, 2 grand juries examined this material and, there was nothing there. That's not true. Okay. Here's the deal. With a criminal case, the burden of proof is much higher than it is with a civil case or with some other type of lawsuit. And code of conduct is a completely different thing, and we'll get to that. With the burden of proof being much higher in a criminal court. Now, here again, remember, we checked our brains at the door. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this burden of proof thing being much higher. I'm going to come back to that in terms of behavior in certain situations. I'm going to come back to that. But he had 22, 26, whatever allegations against him. All right. Now, let's just be practical about this. Let's suppose you owned a plumbing company. And a plumber came to you and applied for a job, and he had 22 allegations, 24, 26, whatever, allegations of sexual misconduct against him. Now, how enthusiastic would you be about hiring him and sending him into someone's home? Now, just be honest with yourself. Okay. And that's what I have always said. It's just like all these dads. I remember when I was in high school, 16, 17 years old, and I'd pick up a girl for a date, and this dad had come out, this domineering dad. He's going to tell me that, his daughter is his world and nothing better happened to his daughter. Do you know what always kind of flashed in my mind? How did you treat girls when you were 16 or 17 that you have all this paranoia about what's going through my mind when I'm taking out your sweet little precious? I have a feeling you don't want your daughter dating someone like you. Okay. But anyway, that's beside the point. Let's move on. I digress and I apologize. Getting back to the practical analysis of this. You have a person with roughly 24 allegations. And by the way, most of those are all settled now. That's another one of those little convenient words. They're settled. We don't need to worry about them. They're all settled. Everything's fine. Okay. In the overall analysis of this, what you have is another investigation that turned up that he solicited roughly 66 massage therapists. And from what I understand, a lot of this activity was on Instagram. Now, practically speaking, what does someone who has access to the best physical therapists, the best trainers in the world, why does someone like that solicit up to 66 individual small providers on social media? Now, here again, remember, we checked our brains at the door. So follow me here. Remember what we said about burden of proof? If you were the type to maybe do something inappropriate with a female provider of some kind, would you choose someone who works at a busy hair salon where there's 20 or 30 people in the room? Or would you choose something like, let's say a massage therapist where privacy is part of the service? It's odd that these situations sort of transpire in an area where burden of proof is a little difficult, because what's the word defenders of these situations say? Well, it's a he said, she said situation. Yeah, it's a he said, she said situation. Oftentimes, maybe not in this one, we don't know, but oftentimes it's a he said, she said situation by design. That's the whole, that's the gig. Okay. And this idea of all these, let's say, communications happening in an odd way on social media and so forth. This goes to code of conduct, which is completely different than anything in the legal system. For example, I have been hired at times to represent different companies at events where I will do MC work or what have you. And there is a code of conduct involved with that. So when I am there representing a company, okay, I cannot be at the bar drinking, which is legal, and I can't be at the bar drinking and hitting on women, which is legal, because that is not how they want their company represented. And if I want the job, that's the deal. Okay, I have to act like a person who's somewhat respectful to my surroundings and people in general. Okay. Now, when you get hired as a professional athlete, and when we are talking about mountains of money, just absolute mountains of money. Okay. And the NFL is a $1 billion company, a $1 billion, multi-billion dollar entity. They want players who they rely on to sell jerseys, put people in the seats, get television ratings and all these other things. They want these people to have a good image. So that's where I don't have any idea what his contract outlined. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say soliciting private massages in that great number was probably a little questionable. So here's where we're at. Remember, we checked our brains at the door. So let's, try to help each other keep track here. We cannot speak for any amount of certainty, guilt or innocence, anything like that about this whole Deshaun Watson deal. Okay, can't be done. What we can do is on a practical level, we can say that's a lot of allegations to come forth. And, maybe those allegations should have been settled before any deal was made. Settled before any deal was made. That's what I would have done. All right. Moving on, aside from anything happening in the court, code of conduct, just like conduct unbecoming an officer that you have in the military. Do we have conduct here that is a violation of code of conduct? Well, here again, I wasn't involved in all those talks. We don't know exactly, but I'd be willing to bet that there were some things going on there that the NFL wasn't necessarily too happy about. Therefore, currently we have this 6-game suspension that's kind of hanging out there. And the NFL is saying, I'm not so sure that this is how we want to demonstrate how we stand behind these situations. In terms of the criminal court, there isn't enough evidence. There's only a few people who know what actually happened. The allegations and the accusations, the vast majority of those have been settled. So now it's a matter of what we are going to do with what the NFL feels appropriate. Now, let me just say this about a lot of the critics of this situation, a lot of the defenders of Watson, they basically say that, you can't just believe accusers, because that's what a lot of people say. We have to believe accusers. That does not necessarily mean that we try and convict them based on an accusation. What that means is, in the past and probably currently, let's say you have a high-ranking city councilman. He's very popular. He's very powerful. Okay. And there's a young woman who doesn't have a whole lot of means. She might be battling addiction and some other things. He ends up assaulting her. Now, she comes forth and says, this person assaulted me. And the comment always is, well, who's going to believe her? We have this councilman, very popular, and then we have this person over here who's battling addiction. She's had encounters with the legal system. Who's going to believe her? And it gets just dismissed out of hand. That's what they are talking about. They're saying that you have to take these situations and give the accuser a voice. You can't just dismiss people based upon whatever, based upon optics or what have you. And that's what the NFL is trying to demonstrate. There's enough numbers here in terms of allegations that there's smoke. Okay. So in terms of how they approach accusers, they want to demonstrate to some degree that they give these situations some credence, some sensitivity. And then there's the other component, which is the behavior, the soliciting of massage therapists via social media and in great numbers. I believe the number was 66 in the course of 17 months. Now, I don't know how many of you, here again, just on a practical level, be honest with yourself. Have you ever gotten a massage? I would say most of us have at some point or another. Do you try over 60? Which is what, one every week, every other week? Are you constantly soliciting these massage therapists on Instagram? Is that how you go? So just be practical in terms of how you evaluate these situations. Okay, now this is where I'm going to talk about the Browns themselves a little bit more as an organization. And here again, remember, bear with me. We checked our brains at the door. So just bear with me. We're going to talk a little football here. Now, I personally, if it would have been me making the decision with all of these allegations, I would have made sure that these were all, quote unquote, settled before we forked over or promised to fork over almost a quarter of $1 billion. But that's just me. We also have a player here, again, being practical, that hasn't been on the field in a long time. And as a matter of fact, I don't know that he was at his best toward the last couple times that he played to begin with. Okay. And he's a little distracted. Yeah, he's got some public relations problems right now. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that the public unrest, let's say, over this issue has remained. When this first broke, I kind of said, somebody at the Browns front office said, hey, look, yeah, this guy's a good player. Now, he's got some problems, but I'll tell you what, it's springtime. There's going to be a lot of hubbub. All those Me Too people are going to be, complaining on social media. But by the time the fall rolls around and we start winning, those people will go away. All right. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's exactly the way these things play out. But this time, not so much. Now, at the time that this podcast is being produced, this is a couple days after the first preseason game of the Cleveland Browns. And this is what the Jaguar fans had to say.
You sick fuck! You sick fuck! You sick fuck! You sick fuck!
Now, if you can't make that out, it's kind of like the football version of Let's Go, Brandon, being chanted at Deshaun Watson while he was on the field. Now, this is problematic for more than just the obvious. From a marketing standpoint, getting back to the Browns as a franchise, the Browns have always had this brand of being the lovable underdog. Okay. Even though they're the team that can often snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And yes, I'm saying that correctly. People love this franchise. And this is reflected in a lot of the market research around the country. For example, you might be a 49ers fan, you might be a Cowboys fan, but everybody kind of likes the Browns. Okay. If their team can't be the team, we want to pull for the underdog. And my concern, if I was working for the Browns, is how have we damaged our brand? Are we still the lovable underdog? Or by contrast, are we taking this great risk? We still end up losing. And at that point, are we going to be the contemptible Browns? That's the one thing that in terms of risk versus reward, if I was working in the Browns front office, I would be saying, hey, look, this Deshaun guy, we can't speak about guilt or innocence, but he's got all these allegations. All right. And no really good team. And then here again, you can talk around this all you want. No really good team was making a big effort to get this guy. All right. It was the Browns who forked over this mountain of money. He originally refused to play in Cleveland, but, $250 million is $250 million. And let's face it, Deshaun Watson at this point really doesn't have a whole lot of mileage available for doing endorsements. So the money has got to come from playing football. So he took the deal. Okay. Now, where does that leave the Browns? And I believe there's a lot of room for error as this plays forward. And here again, this is where I'm going to talk about the Browns a little bit. Notorious bad decision makers. Notorious. Okay. The Browns had some issues over the last year or two, some of which was attributable to Baker Mayfield. I don't particularly feel that he was a bad quarterback. The problems that they had extended far beyond Baker, whether you like him or not. The play calling was ridiculous. Play calling was absolutely ridiculous. With some of the best running backs in the league, you didn't run them enough. When you did run them, you run them in obvious running situations. Then when you get yourself backed into an obvious passing situation, you have your injured quarterback throw long downfield. I mean, it was just absolutely nuts. Okay. And this is still playing out. Okay. After the Jaguars game, we have the center who, unfortunately, I feel so bad for him. I'm sure he was very excited about playing with so much talent this year. He apparently is out for the season. And as I recall, the center before that was let go during the offseason. So now here again, this is the same problem. The line in football is very important. It is very important. And there have been so many times in the past, I don't care how good the quarterback is. I don't care how good your running back is. If your quarterback is always running for his life during every pass play, and if your running backs are getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, there's only so much good that is going to come out of your offense. And here we are. We have a compromised line with a quarterback that may or may not play and $250 million in the balance. This is typical Browns. Public relations. Was this a good move for your brand? Okay, no matter how you feel about Deshaun Watson, just be honest with yourself. Is this a good move for your brand? I would have to say probably not. And unfortunately, from a public relations standpoint, this is playing out the way these things always play out. There's a cycle where they first break, there's all these accusations, there's all these allegations, and there's denial. And then the heat gets turned up. So somebody says, you know what, well, maybe we should say something that sounds like an apology. So you come out there and you say, oh, well, we're so sorry for all the people that we've impacted in the community. And then the next step is usually going to rehab or finding Jesus. So is that the next step? Finding Jesus? I'll tell you what, I got a lot of listeners in Pittsburgh. Maybe you guys could do us a favor. maybe you guys could send over Ben Roethlisberger and he can help Deshaun find Jesus.
Hallelujah!
Wouldn't that be awesome? Now that would just round out the whole cycle and we can just put this whole ugly thing behind us and move forward. Now there's the cliches that always come into play. If you are new to the podcast here and you're here because of the Browns, Deshaun Watson commentary, let me just say that I have a history of being an advocate for survivors. And we have to do a better job being sensitive to people who are survivors of this type of trauma. These types of situations when the news breaks and there's all this rhetoric and there's all this arguing online, it triggers survivors. It can be very difficult for them. And when these types of situations break, we also have to be fair across the board. And here's what I mean. When an accusation of a famous person is made, everybody goes into their camp. There's the people who want to try and convict the accused, and there's the people who want to defend the accused before any of the facts are heard. And that is doing everyone a disservice. When something like this breaks, we have to give the accuser the amount of respect to hear their story. And we have to give the accused the proper respect and time to make a defense. And that is very, very important. I also want to speak to the profession of massage therapists. This is a profession that, because of incidents like this and others, has become a punchline. And later this month in Cleveland, and this here again, I'm not setting up a joke, the AMTA, which is the American Massage Therapy Association, they are having a convention, their national convention in Cleveland. And I would certainly hope that certain members of the media, and I would certainly hope that the local people in Cleveland on social media behave with a certain amount of decorum and does not turn this event into some funny joke. These are professionals who are trying to come together and learn how to better serve their patients. Okay, so let's treat this industry and let's treat this convention in Cleveland with a certain amount of respect. All right, there it is. There's the podcast. My name is Billy Dees. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter and you can tweet me on Twitter. Real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today, and we will talk to you again very soon. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find The Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.